Hey, what's going on? Do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. If you like the content, I want to just keep on creating more and more stuff instead of going in and making YouTube comments and then deleting them. So let me just run through what I want to see this Chargers team do under Jim Harbaugh. And I don't think it's going to be one season, but within the next 3 seasons, this is what I'd like to see. So I'll just run through it real quick and then we'll come back and we'll go through each thing individually. So first thing is I want to see the Chargers have a balanced attack. So I want them to be able to run the ball and pass the ball equally well, maybe a little bit more runs than passes. And I want to make sure that that defense is guessing. I want to have a primary dual threat running back that's able to lead the rushing attack to more than 5 yards per carry. I want to see the defense hold its own weight. I want to see things like turnovers and sacks and intimidation of the other offenses that they're playing against. I want to see the special teams be amongst the best. If they're already there, I want them to stay amongst the best. And I want to see injuries managed differently. So if they can't stop the injuries from happening, I want to make sure that there's enough depth on the roster to where if there's a guy injured, it's not a problem. Next man up. There's not a huge drop-off in play like there's been in the past. So let's go back. So must have a balanced attack. So what I want to see is the Chargers offense keep the other team's defense guessing. I want Herbert to have a prime opportunity to unleash that arm talent against any team that decides they're going to put an extra man in the box. Remember, in Anthony Lynn's last season, Herbert's first, Guyton's first, Tyron Johnson's first. We never even heard of these guys, but both of those guys had 4.3 speed, and they kept sending them deep. And I remember there was an article talking about how Tyron Johnson's the hardest working man in the league or something to that effect because he just kept running these routes deep and not getting the ball. But you know what would happen every once in a while with him and Guyton continuing to run those deep routes? They caught the defense slipping on several occasions and caught huge passes for the Chargers. I mean, I remember the huge pass to beat the Raiders in overtime, huge pass to beat the Jaguars, huge couple of passes to almost beat the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, I mean, they were making huge plays out there, and they were just sending these guys deep. These are not the best players, but they're the speediest players. So if the Chargers aren't going to draft Malik Neighbors, who's a guy who I think would absolutely explode in the Chargers offense, there's other guys that they can bring onto this team that are just as fast. If they're willing to run those routes and not always get the ball, we're going to see a return to that rookie Herbert where he just dropped bombs on defenses, and you can't discount the fact that the Chargers are going to go deep. You know, and another thing is I want to take a second to give Anthony Lynn his credit. I mean, I don't know if you remember me a few years ago, absolutely lambasting this guy for not being strategic, but you got to give him his credit because one of the things he did, which was strategic, is when it came to Herbert, he made sure that quarterback guru Pep Hamilton was on this team coaching Herbert up. He hired the right offensive coordinator. History's shown that. Shane Steichen, he went from Herbert. Herbert had a phenomenal rookie season. He took Jalen Hurts to the Super Bowl. And now that he's gone, the Philadelphia Eagles have come crashing back down to earth. So he hired the right offensive coordinator. The only problem is he's an old school coach. He let Shane Steichen manage the clock. That was a big mistake. He should have been doing that himself. Okay. And if you don't believe me, well, Phillip Rivers was on the team. So, you know, Phillip Rivers was probably doing a lot of that clock management. When Phillip Rivers left, Shane Steichen was doing it. Complete disaster. So another thing is, this is something I just see a lot of criticism against Anthony Lynn for, but I think it's perfect. He wanted to keep Herbert on the bench, not because Tyrod Taylor was better than Herbert. He didn't believe that, in my opinion. I think that Herbert was the type of quarterback that he was wanting, but he wanted to make sure that Herbert was prepared as possible to play when his number was called, and he was. So people are trying to act like Herbert wasn't coached up or something. To me, that's crazy. Herbert did not come into the NFL ready to play NFL football. He was coached up by Pep Hamilton and the rest of the offensive staff. He soaked it up, and by the time that season rolled around, he was ready to play. That's a testament to how smart that guy is, how dedicated he is, and how that coaching staff prepared him to play, because you know that at Oregon, they did not prepare that guy to play NFL football. You know this. So the next thing is I think that, the play action pass, if we got a good rushing attack, that there's a threat to the other team, it can result in some big plays between the 20s, whether it's touchdowns or it's just to get inside the red zone, and we'll talk about that in a second. So as far as I'm concerned, Herbert's got to drop bombs on the defense, put that back on tape for other teams to see, hey, man, we can no longer just assume that the Chargers aren't going to bomb us. They've got a couple of fast guys. These guys are always running out. We've got to stop that. Got to put that back on tape. Now, Herbert, one thing about this guy is we know that he can both pass to the both sides of the field, and he can pass deep and he can pass under. This guy can make a defense cover the entire field. And if they've got a rushing attack that makes you have to creep up and you also have to cover the back end, that's going to be crazy for opposing defenses to have to deal with. Now, like I said, it might not happen in the first year, but you got to work towards that. One thing I'd love to see, I know it's not going to happen, but one thing I'd love to see is the Chargers bringing back Marty Schottenheimer's gold zone, where you make your money. So inside the 20s going into the end zone for the touchdown, where you make your money and where you win your games is being able to score inside the red zone. So the heck with calling it the red zone. I love calling it the gold zone. I've never forgotten that. That's one of the greatest things I've ever heard in my life. And it's much more effective, your offense that is much more effective when you can run the ball with authority inside the gold zone. So the other team has to figure that you're going to either run or pass. You can do both as equally well or equally as well. Now, one thing that the Chargers, I'm not sure if they have this or not. It's an argument for Brock Bowers. They need a tight end that can make the defense pay inside the red zone. Could possibly be Donald Parham. I'm excited to see what Ben Herbert can do with Donald Parham. They can get this guy bigger, stronger, faster. Guy's going to be a complete nightmare in the red zone. Not going to count on that happening because he's injured a lot. But what if they were able to draft a Brock Bowers and then also bring in a couple of really fast guys that might not be as good as a Malik Neighbors or a Marvin Harrison, but what they can do is go deep and catch those passes. If you got a couple of guys that can do that, as many as possible, that's going to allow Herbert to air that ball out. Now, back to the rushing attack. I think that it's a must that the team's able to average 5 yards per carry or more to be an elite rushing attack. I want to keep the other team on the field, wear them out. The fourth quarter, they're not as well conditioned as the Chargers. They're ready to quit. And some of those last-second losses that we're getting, that is not a thing with, what was it? They say it was 29-1. I don't know if I believe that stat, 29-1 or something to that effect in games that decided by one score or less for Harbaugh. It could be the conditioning. I don't know if that's true or not. I'd have to look that up. I didn't look it up before I started this, but if they can wear the other team out, it's going to instill confidence in your team in the fourth quarter that these guys aren't going to be able to hold up against our rushing attack. We're going to get these guys. I want to see defensive backs I want to see them making business decisions out there. I want to see the team root out the weak man on the other team's defense. They're you saw that 63 to whatever debacle against the Raiders. I didn't watch that. I turned it off. But somebody out there watched it. That some of our team members, some of the people on the team were quitting. Those are the weak men. I want to look at the other team's defense. I want to find those weak men, root them out, run the ball right at them. Now, a lot of times in the modern NFL, I think it's horrific. I think it's very stupid. But, that's just me. I don't think it makes any logical sense to have running back by committee. I think that's dumb. That's my opinion. I think it's dumb. I want to see a dual threat running back that is the primary running back that can catch passes out of the backfield and also run the ball with equal effectiveness. If you go back and you look at the 2007 Chargers and when LT was injured, why was the combination of Darren Sproles and Michael Turner not as effective as LaDainian Tomlinson? In my opinion, LaDainian Tomlinson can catch and run the ball equally as effectively. Doesn't matter what you do. If you throw the ball, he's going to catch it. He's going to run with it. If he's coming out of the backfield with the ball in his hand, you're in danger. Obviously, if Michael Turner the Burner's in the game, he's a big, slow to start, but really fast upper end speed. It's pretty obvious. The guy's he's going to take the ball and he's going to run it out of the backfield in all likelihood. If Sproles is in the game, in all likelihood, it's going to be a pass. Now, both of these guys, Sproles was probably even better than LaDainian Tomlinson catching passes out of the backfield. And Michael Turner the Burner in his prime was probably better than LaDainian Tomlinson running the ball. But flat out, Michael Turner the Burner was nowhere near as effective as LaDainian Tomlinson at catching passes out of the backfield, and Sproles was nowhere near as good as running the ball out of the backfield as LaDainian Tomlinson. So they might have been a little bit better at their specialties, especially Sproles, but when you put it all together, and also LT's pass blocking, you can't touch the man. So what does that do to the defense? The defense, when LaDainian Tomlinson in the game, you have no idea whether the Chargers, in a lot of situations, you have no idea whether the Chargers are going to run the ball or pass it. If you don't have a guy like that out there, you're letting the defense off the hook, and I'm not down with letting the defense off the hook at any time. So, well, what are the positives of running back by committee? I'd say that they keep their running backs fresher. And that's basically it. I mean, other than keeping the running backs fresher, I don't see any positivity in that. And if you got a well-conditioned guy that's ready to take that load, he's got the size 220, then that should not be a problem. Get a big lead and put that guy on the bench at the end of the game or something, or put a big guy in there to run the clock out. That's how you get your refresher in. Now, let me see. So if we're talking about this running back by committee, right, and letting teams off the hook, I think you're letting them off the hook if the rotational back is a specialist in one area. So I'm the type of guy, I want dual threat running backs all throughout the roster with maybe a big guy for short yardage. So, for example, take a look at the Chargers' last pretty good football team, that 12-4 team, I forget the year, with Melvin Gordon, right? Now, people want to sit up here and pretend like Melvin Gordon was garbage. People are trying to say he fumbled a lot. I think he had one fumble that year, and the Chargers recovered it and took it to the house for a touchdown. So that one fumble, I think he had a fumble against the Ravens. They called that back. So he didn't have any fumbles of any note that year. He was the number one running back against 8-man fronts. The guy was a threat to either take a screen pass to the house or run to the house. That is the type of running back that you need. The Chargers' biggest mistake was not paying that guy. I think that they could have come to some sort of agreement, maybe not the $12 million a year, but they could have done 10 or something. I think that was a big mistake letting that guy go. It derailed the entire team. But hey, we got Herbert out of it, so whatever. And then you look back at the guy before Melvin Gordon was Ryan Matthews. Now, to me, Ryan Matthews was an LT clone. Physically, he might have even been better than LT, but he didn't have LT's football IQ. The guy was pretty much uncoachable. Mm-hmm. That could possibly be to him being raised by a single mother. I think he was. I might be wrong about that. I don't know, but he was uncoachable. And that's a trait of somebody who wasn't raised with their father. They're hard to coach. People say, what are you going to do about those fumbles that you're having, Ryan? He's like, I'm not worried about that at all. And then goes back out and fumbles again. But if you look at this guy's highlight film, it was incredible. Now, let's see. Let's skip to the next thing. So the defense needs to hold its own weight. So we'll go back from 2007 to 2003, right? Now, that 2003 team was actually pretty good at running the ball. I think they averaged 5.1 yards a carry. I'm going off of memory here. But there were two things that completely derailed this team. One is they didn't have a reliable third down receiving threat. They had David Boston, who was way too buff. He was falling down, trying to cut. And Gates was probably pretty good, but he was a rookie. He didn't really get the prime opportunity, and he probably wasn't that good as a rookie. He was pretty good. I mean, towards the end of the season, I remember seeing him catch this touchdown pass, which was incredible. I was like, that guy's pretty solid. And then if you go to the defense, now you think that Brandon Staley was a bad defensive coordinator? The guy they had back then, Dale Lindsey, was completely incompetent. Defense couldn't stop anything. I remember Priest Holmes just taking it to the house, man. That defense was terrible. So in 2004, what did they do? They hired a competent defensive coordinator in Wade Phillips, and they got a mismatched nightmare in Antonio Gates. They also had a bunch of solid receivers. I mean, they had Eric Parker and Keenan McCardell. They were solid veterans that made solid veteran-type plays. But they also had these two giant wide receivers in Vincent Jackson and Malcolm Floyd. Now, besides LT and Lone Neal sneaking out of the backfield, all those receivers made some amazing plays for the team. Malcolm Floyd took over that game, man. If you don't remember that 2006 game against the Cincinnati Bengals, you need to go back and watch that. That was a Malcolm Floyd classic. Now, another thing about the skipping ahead from 2004, because that basically what I was saying from 2003 to 2004. So they went from being, I think, 4-12 to 12-4. I actually got into being a sports writer, even though my writing was horrible, but I was a big smack talker. I got into sports writing because I was on, I forget what the name of that Chargers board was, but there was this Chargers forum. And I used to be on there, and I wrote a post about how the Chargers could go from 4-12 by replacing Dale Lindsey, that horrible defensive coordinator that's worth about 4 wins there, if not more. And then they needed to add on at least somebody that was a reliable receiver, could get them 1,000 yards. I remember being blown away, even though Gates did not get 1,000 yards receiving, he was so effective. He totally transformed this football team. So that team literally jumped from 4-12 to 12-4 by fixing the defense and bringing in an incredible tight end that was an absolute nightmare in the red zone. So that's one reason why I would want to have Brock Bowers over Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. That's not because I think that he's more explosive and better than they are. It's just that if you have a tight end in there that's incredible, a mismatched nightmare in the red zone, that along with a rushing attack is a complete nightmare for defenses. Even if the wide receivers catch more yardage, the tight end to me is a far more deadly and effective weapon to turn your team around. So skipping back to the 2007 Chargers, this is the reason why this is my favorite Chargers team of all time. They had 42 sacks and 48 turnovers. They had 13 different players make a sack. They were led, obviously, by Sean Merriman and Sean Phillips. Merriman, I think, had 12.5. Phillips, I think, had 8.5. I think they had a total of 21 sacks together. But a bunch of other players also made sacks, and they would celebrate to high heaven if they got a sack or any sort of a stop on you. But the thing is that pass rush caused 30 interceptions. That's crazy. To me, that's a crazy amount of interceptions. But they also had 18 defensive fumble recoveries, defense and special teams, I think. They were just vacuuming those turnovers up. So they averaged about 3 turnovers a game, and it continued in the playoffs as well. They almost beat Brady with it, making him turn the ball over. So I would love to see, with our 3 pass rushers, Joey, Khalil, Tuli. Yeah, they're an incredible pass rushing trio. And I don't forget the numbers, but they get an incredibly high number of sacks if they're on the field at the same time. So you got to hope that those guys can stay healthy. Now, another thing I'd love to see, now this is something that derailed the Chargers in the past. The special teams, which are pretty good, they need to continue to be special. I mean, you remember the 2010 Chargers, I think it was, with the number 1 offense and the number 1 defense. Only team with the number 1 offense and number 1 defense in the single season to miss the playoffs. And I think the only one to miss the Super Bowl, if I'm not mistaken. Almost all those teams won the Super Bowl. Chargers didn't even make the playoffs because their special teams was so bad. They blew at least 3 or 4 games directly at the beginning of the season. So the special teams has to be a weapon. I remember one thing about the punter, Mike Cyphers, back in the day. You used to always hear Marty Schottenheimer refer to that guy as a weapon. And he single-handedly beat maybe not single-handedly, but he had a big impact on beating Peyton Manning and the Colts because he kept pinning these guys inside the 5-yard line every time the Chargers punted, which in most incredible performance I've ever seen from a player in the playoffs in my life. That was incredible. Now we have a great punt returner in Darius Davis. I think he's the best in the league. He needs to stay the best. The blocking needs to be the best. Now, we also have a new kick return format. Now, I'm not really going to try to describe it to you. I need to watch it a few more times, but I am going to try to describe it. So the kicker, I forget where he starts, like the 35-yard line. And then the two opposing teams have blockers and rushers opposing each other. And the kick returner is between the 1 and the 20, something like that. But anyway, I'm not going to try to describe that right now. Maybe I'll come back and do a video later. But basically, if we have a really physical team with this new format, when we're returning, we could be at a huge advantage because maybe our blockers are better than, if we're real physical and we're better than them, we're blowing them off the ball on returns. Hell, man. Darius Davis gets some daylight, he could go. So we might be looking at a lot of kick returns for touchdowns for Davis. This is incredible. It's more like a punt return than a kick return, in my opinion, anyway. So I'd love to see what Darius Davis can do here. But by the same measure, we can't allow that, when we're trying to defend these kick returns, we can't allow that to become an Achilles heel to the team. So I think whoever masters this new kick return format, is really going to be a winner when it comes to the regular season and getting to the playoffs. So hopefully this new kick return format, Ryan Ficken, you got to do your thing. So the last thing I want to talk about today are injuries. So I'm going to have to say Ben Herbert has to be as advertised. I went back and I watched a video of this guy from years ago, and the way he was explaining things, the guy just gets it. It seems like it's common sense, but a lot of times, and I remember my but in high school, we had a class in San Diego. I had a guy that gave us the driving permit test, just a practice test to make sure we were ready for it. And he said something that stuck with me. He said that a lot of times people are using their common sense, but their sense is a little bit too common. You would think that a lot of the things that Ben Herbert preaches, and I need to go and review that video and break it down for you guys, but basically with the nutrition and the stretching and things like that, you would think that other strength and conditioning teams would have gotten that, but their common sense is a little bit too common. They just don't get it. So I want to see this team be way better conditioned and ready for the fourth quarter. He's got to be as advertised. If you look at the 2007 season, now these were all freak injuries, so I don't think your conditioning would affect this, but this is just an example of how you can be derailed. So the Chargers were going into the 2007 playoffs. I think they were on a 8-game winning streak, and by the time they got to the AFC Championship, it was a 10-game winning streak or something to that effect. But in the game against the Colts, well, first of all, let's go back to the game against the Titans, the wild card game. Gates catches the pass, he's on the ground. He gets dove on by some dirty Tennessee Titans players under that scumbag Jeff Fisher. I hate that guy. I'm so glad he got a win against every NFL team but the Chargers. He's a scumbag. I'm glad he didn't get that win. I hope he never gets an opportunity to coach again. He is a scum. So Gates got injured by a dirty hit by the Titans while he was already down on the ground. In the regular season, Rivers got dove into crossbody into the knees by one of Jeff Fisher's dirty, rotten Tennessee Titan defensive ends. And then in the divisional game against the Colts, he then blew out his knee. And I'm pretty sure that him getting weakened with that dirty hit from that scumbag Jeff Fisher's craptastic, idiotic defensive end. I know that hit is what weakened his knee and caused him to blow that knee out in that game against the Colts. And then also in the game against the Colts, LT tried I don't know if he was just feeling himself, but he tried an insane spin move that he never did before. and got his knee, the guy would have like hit him in the back and knocked him down. It just been a regular tackle, or he might not even got him at all. I don't know. But he tried a crazy spin move, and his front of his knee got dove into. And I'm pretty sure he would not have gotten his knee dove into if he hadn't done that crazy spin move. But he was just feeling himself that day. So those three superstars got injured, and by the time they played the New England Patriots, the undefeated New England Patriots, they had no star running back, a limping quarterback, and Antonio Gates was nowhere near the red zone threat that he normally was. Good old Seau kept us out of the end zone, and a game that we probably could have won, even though I don't really think we would have. I think the NFL would have made sure of that. But a game we could have won, we were kept out of the Super Bowl for the second straight year against an inferior NFC opponent that we would have just absolutely destroyed. But that's what happens. But anyway, that's what I would like to see the Chargers do to try to create some of that magic from the mid-2000s. And hopefully it happens. But like I said, thanks for listening. And please subscribe to the channel. We'll see if we can make some more videos on a regular basis. Talk to you guys later.